Lynn, let's kick her off. We got a nice turnout here, so let's get into some content. We'll have some laughs. Well, maybe I'll have some laughs, and then I'm really excited about the back half of this conversation because we were able to snare somebody really smart, really fun to talk with, and I'm looking very much forward to chatting with him. But before we get started, I'm going to ask you for some housekeeping, and as soon as we get there, everybody's muted, so that's kind of where that goes, right? But you've got a Q&A button, and you've also got a chat button. Obviously, the Q&A button is where we would like you to be. You'll get a full recording of this, by the way. But if you have questions during the course of this, just submit them via Q&A because we're going to have some time on the back end to address those, right? So, it won't be a real-time Q&A. Share your feedback throughout the poll survey. If you don't like my shirt, you don't like my glasses, feel free to bring that up. But if you have follow-up questions, my email will be at the end of this part of the discussion, and then you can always send an email to adexpert at groundtruth.com. And with that, I'm going to get started here. So let me just advance slides here. Hello. There you go. All right, so overview. I'm going to give you probably a 30-second GroundTruth commercial because you're here. You may or may not know who GroundTruth is. It's not a pitch. It's more just an idea of who we are as a company and what we believe in and what we stand for in the ad tech space. I'll talk a little bit about what I think CTV, OTT, and streaming video in general look like today and what they're likely to look like in the future. And again, we're going to prognosticate a little bit, but we're using some data based on what we think extrapolations of numbers will look like in terms of the continuing growth of streaming video and on-demand usage in the marketplace and why it's important to marketers. Then we get to chat with my friend Greg Spiegel. And I cannot wait for that because Greg and I have talked a few times and, getting to know each other before this conversation. And he's so lights out smart. I really can't wait to have that discussion. So I'm going to get started with the overview of GroundTruth, and you can go to our website groundtruth.com. It will tell you a lot more about what we do, but in effect, really what we do is we exist to map the physical world. We map about 6 million different locations around the United States, retail locations, you name it, we've got it polygoned, and the idea behind the polygons are that we can then build really unique audiences from real world behavior. And that real world behavior helps us target and activate campaigns for our clients. And so, that's really kind of where what we were grown up doing. And we've evolved from being a predominantly mobile advertising company, leveraging physical real world behavior and transitioning that same ad tech platform over to connected TV as well, and doing really well with that. This is kind of how we do it. There's 3 pieces of the way in which our model operates. Location, which is really pinpointing through what we call a blueprint, pinpointing specific locations, the 4 walls of those locations. And then the place, which is the contextualized physical world around that. That could be the building that it's in, the strip mall that it's in, the neighborhood that it's in. But if you look at that center box, you'll see that is that green piece right there. That is the actual store that we are looking for visitation on. And then the last piece is our actual visit determination. And it verifies that a consumer who saw one of the ads that GroundTruth served actually entered the plane of that polygon, that green box. And we're able to deliver that visitation information back to our clients as evidence of success of the campaign. The MRC, the Media Rating Council, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, nonprofit advertising watchdogs or verification arms, they gave us last year accreditation across location, place, and visitation for our ad tech, which we were very proud of, continue to be proud of, because it tells us that we're doing the right things, and it tells us that a third-party validator looked at how we were approaching ad tech and said, this is really good, keep doing it this way. And then lastly, we own a company called WeatherBug. And what WeatherBug does for us, in addition to allowing us to create embedded or native weather triggers on conditions inside of our advertising campaigns for our clients, it also gives us access to its own proprietary first-party data. So we've got a lot of data to model from WeatherBug as well. So that's kind of the 30-second pitch on GroundTruth. And let's get into some of the fun stuff. And again, I would encourage you, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A bubble, okay? Just because we'll get to them at the end. I packed a lot of content in here. Some of it I think is relatively new, or at least poking its head around the corner. And some of it is kind of a retrench of where we are midway through 2022. But I will encourage questions about, well, that's nice, Tom, but, and then, we can kind of see whether or not we can answer some of those questions at the end. So the first thing I love to start, if anybody's ever been in any of my presentations, and Jamie Valancourt, I know you're on the phone right now, anybody who's ever been in any of my presentations knows that I love starting with this slide, because this eye chart is the way that the world is operating today in terms of on-demand video content. If you're the viewer in the center of this bullseye, you've got so many different content avenues to begin your journey on. And you've got so many different services that you can select in order to achieve that content. And you can watch it on so many different types of internet-connected devices today, that the world of OTT, over the top, is incredibly fragmented. And people watch their content when they want, how they want, on different networks and devices all the time. And I always try to kind of imagine, a comparison to linear TV. Where linear TV, the content is king, and it is, and it was, and it always will be king. If you want to watch must-see TV on Thursday nights, on NBC, you're going to see Seinfeld, you're going to see Friends. You got to sit on your couch and be prepared for that. But in today's streaming world, the consumer is king, and the consumer is the person who decides when they want to consume this content, how they want to consume it, what device they want to play it on. And that's a really important and powerful paradigm shift in viewing behaviors. So this new ecosystem, a smart marketer is going to look at this and they're going to say, you know what? It's not about the content, it's about the people. And I always say, this is kind of my thing that I like to say all the time, is fall in love with people, not publishers, because the people are who we're trying to target. So if you fall in love with your audiences, you're going to find them no matter where they are in this food chain of craziness on this screen. What is CTV versus OTT? We hear the acronyms all the time. CTV means connected TV. OTT means over the top. In effect, it's any way that you can absorb streaming content using an internet connected device. And we classify OTT, not everybody does it this way, but here at GroundTruth, we classify OTT as 4 screens. When you're buying an OTT campaign from us, you're buying access to streaming content on a phone, on a tablet, on a desktop or a laptop, and on a large screen connected TV. You can also say, you know what, I don't want those smaller device types. I only want the big screen TV, and that's just CTV, that's connected TV. So now you know the difference between the two. OTT encompasses everything, including CTV, and CTV is only the big screen. And if you understand that definition, the rest of this is super easy. But always just think of, like, when you're looking at your TV tonight, and no matter what you're doing, if you're sitting in your living room, just point at it and go, that's a connected TV, because chances are it's a smart TV and it's connected somehow anyway. What is, why is it important to have streaming video, as a vital part of your marketing mix? It's an interesting question, but ultimately, really what you want to do with streaming video is you want to extend your reach into audiences that may not be present in places where you had previously been advertising. And when you extend that reach, what you also want to do is measure the response, or what I call performance marketing, and not me, but what the industry is calling performance marketing. Performance marketing is really just measuring the efficacy of the campaign. And connected TV in particular has always had this kind of style around it that says it's a branding and an awareness tool. But it's more than that. It actually gets you the opportunity to measure audience response. And that can be through a number of different metrics. It could be time on screen being served. It could be video completion rate. It could be foot traffic attribution. It could be website transfers. There's numbers of ways where CTV has evolved to mirror other ways in which digital advertising can be measured. And then ultimately, like, the reason why I wake up in the morning is when I think about CTV, what I really want is I want somebody who is hungry to get more out of their video investment and is willing to look at what the options are that are out there and then figure out whether or not, there's a solution that meets their needs. So ultimately, we really want to help people get to, a high ROI on a targeted video investment. So let's look at some trends and forecasts and viewership. I love this slide. It's kind of a crazy slide, so it takes a second for you to break it down a little bit. Don't worry about that top rail right now. Just focus on those three big boxes. Today, there are really kind of three types of people in the on-demand universe. There are the cord nevers, where you've got somebody who is maybe 20, 21, 22 years old, who maybe even grew up in a household that never even had a cable box. And so to them, they don't even understand the concept of cable TV or linear TV. They just know on demand. They know that they have a number of SVOD, subscription video on demand services like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime. And they also take advantage of a lot of AVOD services, which is advertising video on demand, which is advertiser supported content like Pluto and like Samsung TV. And so having access to that as a cord never means that you can gain access to all the programming you could ever want, and you can watch it when you want. And that is a huge constituency in our population. Right now, it's about 34 million people. Cord cutters are those ones that kind of sit in that middle bucket where they say, you know what, we've always had a cable box, but one day economically, we looked at this and said, why are we paying $140 a month for cable so that we can watch, live sports or that we can watch, cable news? Is there a different or a better way for us to achieve the viewing objectives of our household by not paying that much money, but by buying the services that we want and then using AVOD or, ad-supported video on demand services to supplement the things that we're paying for? And the cord cutters are a huge, huge population. There's 87 million people who fall into that cord cutter category. And that just kind of shows you this arc and decline of the ways in which people are consuming content today. And then the last thing, you've got the cord stackers. And these are like people like me. I still have a cable box. Not sure why we do, but we still have it. But we also subscribe to, Hulu and to Netflix and Amazon Prime and to, I think, HBO, I'm not sure. But, we've got a ton of services that we're paying for. Apple TV, that's what it was. We're paying for those things. But, when you size those, the investment is not significant. But when you really kind of stack it on top of the cable box subscription, it ends up being significant. But either we're too technically, unsophisticated, or we're just too comfortable in the ways that we're doing things. So we end up stacking these two options of it that are available to us. That boomer generation, the people who are fitting into that cord stacker universe, there's still 50 million of them in the marketplace, but they are increasingly moving their viewing consumption over to connected TV and OTT, primarily due to the fact that there's more access to content when they feel like looking at it. I love that slide. It's a great slide. But this is really what the result of all of that is. Like the migration, if you will, of eyeballs is moving from linear TV or traditional viewing to digital video or digital TV, or CTV, I should say. And eMarketer believes that it will actually overtake digital video consumption, will actually overtake linear TV consumption in 2024. And so when we approach the back half of 2022, and there's only a 16-minute gap between viewing, and we look at 2023, and that closes that gap dramatically, really ultimately by 2024, smart marketers will know that they need to start blending these two solutions, and they should really start thinking about doing that sooner rather than later, because the TV space is fixed, and the amount of time that you can buy is fixed. And so that drives a supply and demand model that is not always economically advantageous to the advertiser, whereas connected TV and OTT is literally an inventory growth movement that allows advertisers to test and learn and do it very inexpensively. And by the way, just if you want to Viva la CTV, you're watching a live stream video right now, so you are part of the revolution. You could be watching, cable news right now, or you could be watching Golden Girls, but you're watching this. And so this is a really good example of how we are using our time in terms of digital video consumption. Access to shoppers, it's going to be weighted more and more towards digital video. And there's a number of reasons, but one of those is what I mentioned before, performance marketing and the ability for you to capture metrics that you can measure in terms of success or failure. So this is a really interesting piece for you to think about in terms of the growth, but not just the growth, but once this arc flips over, it's not coming back. So Convergent TV is a fancy way of saying that you're going to merge the best of both of these solutions, because TV by itself is it's a monster, $65 billion a year being spent in television. And, through in 2022, it'll be close to 19 billion in connected TV. So you can see that there's a huge disparity in spend moving towards linear. Sorry, that's my dog. But, in the end, it's all just TV. That's what it comes down to when you're watching big screen. And so all of us today, we're flipping back and forth between on-demand content and between linear content, depending on what our availability is to those different models. But linear offers that reach and, what my friend Brian Shepard calls jackhammer frequency of being able to get your message out into a marketplace. So if you want to hit the Chicago DMA with your car dealership ad, linear local advertising is the best way to do that. If you want to be much more targeted and you want to extend your reach and you want to be able to measure in real time, you're going to want to layer some connected TV investment on that as well. So marketers need to learn how to take the best of both of these things. It's kind of like a balloon. You want to squeeze one way and just say, whoa, that might pop. So pull it back a little bit, figure out what am I trying to accomplish and how am I going to get there? But, it's not just about big screen. It's also about other devices. So, audiences are everywhere. And this is an interesting chart from eMarketer. It kind of shows that we're viewing on multiple devices every single day. You can see that the center one, the desktop and laptop, even though that's the smallest at 26 minutes, it's still nearly half an hour a day that we're watching digital video on a laptop or a desktop. That's a lot of time, a half an hour. Almost an hour this year in mobile. Which is, to me, pretty amazing because, you've got access to all the content you could want in a mobile device on in a streaming platform. And then lastly, at the top, you've got that gray bar, and that is where you're essentially what we say all other connected devices, that is tablets, but it's primarily connected TVs. And so when you measure all that together at 2 hours and 41 minutes in 2022, the question is do I want to buy Convergent TV? Or do I want to leverage some OTT, which is all 4 screens, so that I can reach this entire audience? Does video advertising work? I'd say yes. But don't take my word for it. There are a number of studies out there that lend themselves to proving that video advertising works. It works anyway. I mean, we all know that. We watch commercials and then we are drawn by the commercial to visit a restaurant or go get a smoothie or buy a car. In fact, we bought my wife's vehicle because of an ad we saw. And so does it work? Sure, it works. Of course. Can you measure that work? That's really the tricky part. And with linear TV and cable TV, you can measure it. But in digital video, you can measure it specifically based on a number of different things. But 69% of people prefer video over text, and that's not surprising for 2 reasons. One, if we don't want to read, or if we're not interested in reading, it's so much easier to sit back and passively absorb a message that's coming at you that has the 2-dimension of sight and sound. 9 out of 10 people want to see more videos from brands or businesses. And I was looking through the attendee list earlier, and I noticed there's quite a few recruiters that are on this call, folks that work in human resources or are professional recruiters for their organizations. The way to make your company pop to potential employees is not by a really fancy Indeed text-based ad. It's by a really good 30-second spot that showcases the value of working in an organization like yours. And you can do that. It's not complicated, and it's certainly not expensive to produce something like that and put it out to a targeted audience. 84% of people said that they've been convinced to buy a product or service after they've watched the brand's video. If you think about Instagram and TikTok and the influence that they have in our shopping behaviors, just by being able to see a glimpse of a product and go, huh, that's pretty cool. That is an influence that you are only going to get if you're incorporating sight and sound with the motion associated with that video. And then I think kind of the piece de resistance for this slide is 66% more leads to video marketers. And, again, as we have click-through rates and other actions that are traditionally measurable in digital, either in stasis or decline, you have to look for a place where more activity can be measured, more engagement with the consumer can produce a lower funnel outcome. And I think video is the way in which we can get there faster. I stole this from my guest. He and I were talking last week, and we started talking about the way in which you layer different types of video solutions to meet objectives. And we talked about having this funnel, inverted, where you'd have linear kind of as your foundation, because you can buy a lot of reach and frequency out of linear. But I flipped it the other way because I think it's easier in the end to just look at it this way. Linear, it provides broad untargeted reach. It's beautiful. It's always been there. I think it should always be here. And it should be part of a marketing mix for anybody's organization that relies on it to get a steady branding message out there. But when you move down into the center of what you'd want your funnel to start producing, you're getting into the connected TV and OTT space. And that's that targeted, non-skippable reach. That's all those cord cutters and cord nevers who aren't going to be at the top of the funnel, but you still need to reach their eyeballs. And connected TV and OTT, at least the way we do it, is non-skippable. And so if you're going to lay out a 30-second spot in the middle of an advertising supported program, then your spot's going to be seen through to completion a very high percentage of times. And then at the bottom of this funnel, I layered in mobile video, because I believe that in-banner video, mobile in-stream, all sorts of different ways in which you can leverage that creative, that asset, in a way that produces a higher volume at a lower cost, is a great way for you to kind of play out this entire funnel so that your brand gets coverage up and down the chain. And mobile video has the additional attraction of being essentially portable, which means that if you've got somebody who is interested in what they're seeing and they want to click on that at the end, or they want to be able to go and look for a location map, you can tack that on, because that mobile video has actually been location driven in the first place. And so that's a really efficient way for you to build a targeted funnel here that leverages the powerful strength of reach and frequency with linear, the targeting and the non-skippable digital measurement of connected TV and OTT, and the equally targeted and measurable mobile video that gives you high volume at a much lower cost. I always recommend blending those bottom two together if you're looking at digital, especially with us or with another provider. We don't provide linear, so you're buying that anyway from somebody else. But if you're looking at the solution and you're saying, how can I blend these two things together? That's a place where we can start having a consultation, and we can figure out, like, how do we collaborate on this to make it really work for what you're trying to accomplish. Now, let's get into really what matters. If you go to a restaurant and you buy a steak and a hamburger shows up, you start thinking to yourself, you might have gotten played, right? And a lot of advertising kind of has that feeling, because you're buying the promise of a result. When you're buying advertising, especially digital advertising, you're buying the promise of the result. You may not even actually see the finished product out in the real world. In fact, most of the time you don't. And that can be unnerving to a marketer, because they're placing their faith and their bet on the outcome of the campaign. But that campaign has to have performance marketing and attribution metrics attached to it. And as I said before, CTV and OTT have always been perceived as more of a branding play. I'm going to get my story out there on a big, 50-inch screen. But it's more than that. It actually has performance marketing capabilities built into it that allow you to make some attribution for some of the impressions that you're serving. And these next few slides are going to be a little ground truthy, and I apologize for that, but they were pre-made, and I couldn't change them and make them the way I wanted them. So I'm just going to leave them the way they are. They're not a commercial for GroundTruth. If you're working with a partner that you're confident with and you're comfortable with, takes good care of you, keep doing it. But some of these will have a GroundTruth flavor to them. But this is the way we build our attribution flywheel for connected TV. Everything in advertising starts with the impression. Doesn't matter if it's a billboard, it doesn't matter if it's TV commercial, it doesn't matter if it's banner ad. Everything starts with the impression, because you cannot get action and you cannot get interest or attention from anybody until they have seen your impression. Once that impression is served, it's not like that's what you paid for. You should actually be able to measure that, and you should measure the value of that. And we do that with what we call video completion rate. So every time an impression is served, we want to measure, was it viewed all the way through to completion? Because that video completion rate is a really important metric for you to start adding up at the end of a campaign, or even midway through a campaign, and say, which ones of these are optimizable so that we can get a higher video completion rate? In other words, which ones should we cut? And you can do that during the course of that campaign in order to optimize something like video completion rate off the impression. But once the impression's served, I'm sitting in my house and I see an impression for Tom Donahue Cadillac, and I go, oh, that's a nice car. And I pick up my phone. I can actually go out to tomdonahuecadillac.com. And when I get there, if Tom Donahue Cadillac has placed the GroundTruth pixel on its site, we'll be able to, that pixel will fire, and we'll be able to tie that back IP address to IP address in order to determine whether or not that CTV commercial influenced that website visit. That's really exciting. It's basically just your standard click through for a traditional banner ad, but it's done on CTV just by virtue of being able to have a pixel in place that fires back and says, this CTV spot was run to this IP address. This IP address has this device hanging off of it right now. It went over to my site, and the pixel fired back that information that could be matched up. Now that's happening that fast, right? But in the middle of that, during the commercial, we also may have inserted a GroundTruth QR code. And that QR code is a QR code, and it's embedded inside of that 30-second or 15-second spot. And I may lean into my TV and take a picture of that. And I do, mostly because I'm kind of a tech nerd, but I do scan these QR codes because I'm curious to know what kind of landing pages people are building and what kind of experiences they're offering when I get there. Because when somebody scans a QR code, it's not by accident. So either they're really curious and you have an opportunity to hook them, or they're low funnel and you have an opportunity to really start to build a relationship with that person. So you've got two steps there already in a 30-second spot that we can measure as attribution. But the big one, the one that GroundTruth really, really banks on for our clients, especially our retail clients, is having real world consumer behavior result in foot traffic. And that is driven by the impression that was served. And so that is the foundation of what we've built. Our 6 million blueprints are all built to sit and wait for that device to break the plane of the polygon so that we can measure that as foot traffic attribution in a deterministic way. And when we do that for our clients, the client says like, well, I got 12 visits last month. And we go, we don't know if that's good or bad. But if your expectations were 20, then we may want to rethink how we're approaching this campaign. If this doubles your expectations, good for you, congratulations. But in the middle of that, we can also say you also got 260 virtual visits and you had 19 QR code scans. And now when you build that body of attribution around that one campaign, that impression really, really brings a lot of weight. So this is a really exciting way for you to think about performance marketing as it relates to connected TV. So this is how we measure the site traffic. I'm going to just take you through those 3 steps really quickly. We measure the site traffic, as I said, just what we're looking for is whether or not, if you look at the picture on the right here on the screen, you'll see that the TV is on, and let's assume that that orange box is a commercial. And let's assume that the woman sitting on the couch with the phone in her hand is saying to herself, that's interesting, I would really like to know more about that. And so she's actually on their website looking up that orange box. Well, we can match that phone tied to the IP address in that house where the CTV commercial was delivered back to a date and timestamp so that we know that that commercial drove that behavior. And in capturing that step in the consumer journey, we're able to help an advertiser figure out, like, are we doing this the right way? How can we learn more from this data? How do we figure out how to move people from the initial drop into our site down the funnel a little bit. So we either are beginning a conversation, collecting more information with them, inviting them to share an email address, anything that they need to do, you need to move them from that CTV spot into your site. And we're able to help track that. And I don't know if you knew this or not. I think this is not surprising, but 94% of us have our smartphones near us while we're watching TV, even connected TV, we still have it. And so that makes the QR code capability functional. It makes the pixel functional, and it gives us the opportunity to engage a client in real time. The QR codes, they're just on-screen brand moments. And I don't say just in a just sort of way, but this is a McCormick Spice example. We'll brand out the QR code so the McCormick logo is dead center in it, and it can be framed anywhere on the screen so that it's sized properly so that somebody can get a scan of it when they're 14 feet away. But on the right is really the interesting information, because you all know what QR codes are. When you look at the age ranges of people who are very willing or somewhat willing to engage a QR code, it ends up being 75% of the people surveyed. And this is a year-old survey. So I don't know that it's gone up all that much. Maybe it went up another few percentage points, but the fact is, like, it's not going to go down. It's not like people said, like, well, I did it and I didn't like the experience. If anything, it just accelerates our ability to capture information and then act on it. And so QR codes, which during the pandemic, really served as menus when you went out, have now become this somewhat ubiquitous way for what was previously kind of a one-dimensional advertising model to turn into this performance marketing engine. And it's really exciting for us to be doing this. We've been running QR codes in our CTV campaign since July of last year, and we've got like a lot of empirical data that shows that that it works, and that it's an efficient way for you to leverage an otherwise a 30-second spot that maybe has a call to action, but this really drives it into a lower funnel call to action. And then the last thing is, I took a screenshot of our discovery tool. This is a tool that most of us spend a lot of time in because we're always curious about traffic and activity that's occurring in a particular category. So I just pulled this really quickly, and I just pulled Panera Bread, which is the blue line in the center of the page. We've got 109 of their Chicago area locations blueprinted. So those are the ones with that green box around the Panera Bread. And out of those 109 locations, we have tracked 45,000 visits to those 109 locations over the past 7 days. This process defaults to 7 days. But if I'm Panera Bread, I might look at that and I might say, how am I ranking good or bad relative to my competitors? And that's where this tool, this discovery tool, is our BI tool. And it allows us to dig a little bit deeper and start looking at foot traffic, market share, time of day market share, whether or not competitor brands are outperforming or underperforming over a 3-month period. So all of this data is available, and it helps us build and plan better campaigns for our clients. Because I think a lot of us go through life with this curse of knowledge. We know something and we can't be told we don't know it. But what we end up with is like a false truth or an assumption that needs to be challenged once in a while. And I think data is the thing that kind of is the equalizer in terms of challenging things. So this type of information helps us build real world foot traffic results for our clients and measure this stuff pretty much, anything you can ask for, we can get. So, Tom, good stuff. I hope that's what you're all writing in your poll surveys. But best practices. This is really, these are things that I tell prospects and clients all the time. They'll say like, well, how much should I spend or what should I do? And I always stop them and I go, wait, first thing I want you to know is you've got to be really clear about what you want your investment to accomplish. And the easiest way to say that is to say, when you spend money on advertising, what do you want it to do for you? And the answer is really where you should focus all of your energy in terms of campaigning. So if somebody says, well, I want my door to swing, or I want my phone to ring, or I want more web traffic, or I need to know that I'm getting a very high video completion rate. You need to know as the client, when you're talking with your partner about connected TV or any other video investment, what your outcome is supposed to be. Be very clear about it. Don't go in shady. If you go in shady, you're going to kind of you'll be satisfied with anything. And that's not good for any of us. So be really smart about how you want your investment to return itself, and then start measuring those things with your partner. It's a collaborative process always. And if you collaborate with your partner and you say, well, let me ask you this, if this works this way, does this work this way? Good partner will say, I don't know, let me dig into some of my data and get back to you. And that's really that collaboration. Or they might say, why do you want that? And then you might say, well, I felt like that was something that I would want my investment to achieve. And they might say, there might be a different approach for us to take here. And so that collaboration, I think, is how you get to smart campaigns that can be executed. But when possible, you should try to blend some skippable video in for volume. I mean, I've talked a lot about CTV and OTT here. Those are non-skippable mediums, but they're expensive. And we charge $25 CPM for connected TV and OTT, either one. And so that's kind of an all-encompassing price. But you might have somebody who says, like, that's a lot. It's not really, but it's if you need that price to be lower or you want more volume, then we can include skippable video, in-banner video, mobile pre-roll, in-stream, whatever mix we want to put together to build perfect cake. We can do that for you and just blend different solutions in place that will ultimately overall lower your CPM. But there are trade-offs. Like I said, you squeeze in the balloon here. I personally like CTV and OTT because you get a high video completion rate, and that time on screen is brand gold. Because if you're targeting the right audience with your message and you deliver that message to that person, 1, they see it, 2, they're probably engaged, and 3, they can't skip it. And so that means that you got 30 seconds of full attention from somebody who is your perfect target audience. So that's really good. Remember that on demand, I have this conversation a lot, so take this for what it's worth from me. On demand is dependent on population density, then inventory. And what that means is, if you are trying to target a very small area and you want only ESPN inventory, it's not like they're going to have a lot more of it than anybody else might have, because everything is dependent on population density. And so when you're clear in the first step of what your investment's going to accomplish, and then you're clear on what on-demand can do for you in a specific population density area, then we can start looking for the right inventory mixes that make sense for the solution you're trying to achieve. But you just know that local DMAs are, they're the fixed amount of people. I live in Highland Park, Illinois, and there are 30,000 people who live in my town. And if somebody wanted to come and give me $20,000, I wouldn't take it because I couldn't spend it. Even if I could spend it, the frequency of those ads to the same body of audience would actually become brand damaging. And so I probably might say to that person, I'll take your 20 grand, but you're going to actually do damage. So why don't we take 10 grand? And why don't we spread that out over a 90-day campaign so that we have that drip factor built in? Maybe we insert a little bit change creative here and there, but we spread that out so that you're getting the longevity of the campaign without pounding frequency into the turf. Focus on audience first. Fall in love with the person, not the publisher. I always hear that people think like, well, I know my audience is watching XYZ, and you think to yourself, really? Does that mean that if that's a one-dimensional look at your audience? In other words, you might look at me and say, oh, he's a suburban guy, probably watches the Chicago Bears, probably likes sports, likes to go out and putt around with his car. And so you've kind of labeled me in this assumptive box. But I also watch HGTV because I do enjoy gardening. And I may watch, the dog channel because I love my dog. And so if you are only going to focus on areas where you think I am going to be, then you are going to miss me in the other places where I might spend the majority of my time. And so it's really important for you to focus on the audience. Fall in love with the person. Let them lead your ad. Don't try and lead them because they're not following anymore. And then the last thing is test, test, test. I don't care what your budget size is. You step in and you say to me, Tom, we want to do this, but we've only got a $3,000 budget. I don't care. Let's go to step 1. What do you want that budget to do for you? Well, we would like to sell 150 cars. I am not your guy, right? But if you say, we're not sure, but we know we want our door to swing and we know we want to be able to collect website traffic. Can you do that? Yes, I can. Now let's figure out if we are going to be on the right path to success. If you come back and you're like, you know what, we want to do X dollars and we want to test this model instead, let's figure it out. Maybe you want to test a branded solution. It doesn't matter. This is the time, and all of the data that I showed you support the fact that video is the king. It's moving in a direction that is digitally focused. You should continue to buy the things that you're buying at the top of the funnel from linear, because it does provide that massive reach. But in the end, the targeting, the ability to look for audiences, the precision accuracy of what we're trying to accomplish, and the attribution, all of those things lie in a CTV OTT solution that your partner, if you're working actively with one of those partners, should be able to deliver to you every day. But test, by all means, just test. Thank you. This is the thank you slide where I take a breath. Everybody goes, whoa, what just happened, right? I'm going to stop my screen share in a second, because I am so excited about this. I've been looking forward to talking with Greg all morning, and I'm going to stop my screen share and bring Greg in, and there he is. Hey, Greg.
How are you, Tom?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing just fine.
Look at me and you. We put shirts on.
Indeed.
We're awesome.
Indeed.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce Greg Spiegel. Greg is Senior Vice President of Analytics and what was it, Greg?
Strategic planning and analytics.
At Source Communications. And he's going to be our little fireside chat today. And he and I are going to run through some Q&A. But before we do that, Greg, just quickly, give some background of who you are and what you do at Source and how you help your clients succeed.
Sure, I appreciate it. First of all, thank you for inviting me. Really excited to be here and part of this conversation today. As Tom said, my name is Greg Spiegel. I am the Senior Vice President of Strategic Planning and Analytics. In the last 20 years, I've been on the agency side. Prior to that, I was on the client side. I really come from the brand side and then retail client side. But have had experience, across really all aspects of marketing, including strategic planning, buying, analytics, client management. Have worked with clients on really both sides, B2C, whether brick and mortar, as well as e-commerce, as well as B2B clients, across a variety of verticals, which we won't even go into. They'll come up as we sort of talk. For the last 6 years, I've been in Source Communications, and we are a full service agency that is really based in the idea that ideas inspire action, and the idea is to come up with strategic planning that works with the client to understand what their goals are and develop everything starting with brand identity and brand strategy, creative development, production, sports marketing, content creation, media strategy, buying, and of course analytics and optimization to help those clients achieve their goals.
So let's go right there, okay? Because you left me a nice gap. Talk to me about how the agency coaches your clients on video investment, because you laid out literally a buffet of things that your agency does. But specific to video, how do you kind of coach your clients to get to a video mindset and what the advantage of video is?
I think your last slide, you covered, obviously we had some conversation and you covered a lot of, you really very nicely covered off a lot of those things. But what's, first and foremost, what does success look like? What are you trying to do? What are your goals? Do you have predefined KPIs? If you don't, let's establish them, because to your point, if you're not measuring something, then it's really hard to determine whether it worked or not. Right. Who's the target, and how is that target consuming media? Maybe specifically video, but ultimately, how are they consuming media? And it's important also to understand the assets that you have available to you when you're going out and doing this, because it's great to sit here and say that we want to do video, but what if you don't have video? Yeah. So we got to make sure that we have all the tools in place Creative is super important in this space now. We have different spot lengths available to us. I mean, depending on which piece of that funnel you're in, it could be short as 6 seconds, could be as long as 60, and ultimately you can send them to an even longer piece of video.
Yeah.
So you really got to have all those pieces and understand where your call to action fits. And quite honestly, how does a QR code fit?
But yeah, I mean, all of it has to, and like you said, it's all based on what the client views as success, and then kind of marching them into either reality or, just disabusing sometimes the things that can't get done, right?
Indeed.
But, when it comes to, like, I talked a little bit about fall in love with the person, not the publisher. Have you had to have that conversation with any of your clients as you navigate the CTV and video space?
We have. I mean, I think that, most clients, most people have a preconceived notion of what others are doing around them. You live in, your daily ecosystem, your family, how you consume what you watch, and you sort of start to live with everybody does it that way. Maybe not. But what we have found, similar to what you were talking about earlier, is that by following the people, you get them at different touch points across their customer journey and across the day. If you only want to be in that one place at that one time, there's so many things that can happen in that one moment when your spot is running that you could miss. So you want to just make sure that you're touching people enough times. And again, this is where that balance of reach and frequency comes in. How often do you reach them? How often do you talk to them without killing them and making them feel like you've just beaten them over the head and now you've actually pushed them to the opposite of what you want?
Right. Yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting is that, I always look at year-over-year trends on things. And one of the things I saw that was kind of crazy, and it's continuing to grow, is it's almost a 20% jump in time spent consuming streaming video year over year from 21 to 22. We're not even done with this year yet. It's probably going to get higher. But it makes streaming pretty critical in terms of reaching audience, right? And just targeted reach. How do you help clients understand how that balance that I was talking about before, that ecosystem balance between different mediums that can deliver the same creative message? How do you coach them to get to that place of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what you were saying before. It's making sure that, look, so much of this depends on, we can talk about we can draw this ideal system and this idea ecosystem and how we want to spend the money. The reality is budget comes into play here. So we have to understand what they have first and foremost and make sure that we're reaching them in the right way. But we do talk to, all of our clients about, these are the different areas where you can reach them. These are the types of creatives that you can reach them with. And again, it kind of goes back to goals and objectives and what you're trying to achieve. But, we also have certain cases within some clients have a very defined, in some cases, one of our QSR clients, we're a local agency for them. So we're dealing in local markets for them. And you've got a national agency that is sort of creating this umbrella effect from a national basis. So what we're doing is we're supporting that. So they're actually giving us the places where they want the additional support to make sure that we're achieving those goals. So much of the coaching comes in understanding the entire ecosystem and what everybody's trying to accomplish and what is our role in achieving those goals.
And this is, as I recall, when we were talking earlier, this was the client that had a general idea of, or they had started in one medium. I believe it was local cable, right? And then you folks said, like, hey, why don't we take this and arc it out a little bit? And that's where the whole concept of the funnel kicked in, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've had, and again, there's a variety of them, but we've definitely had, clients from a national perspective say, okay, we're going to cover these things, and some of that could be linear, right? We'll start there. We'll just keep it simple as linear, and they're like, and so to add in underneath, and again, this goes into the cord cutters and the cord nevers and all of those pieces. The reality is the content is king. People are just consuming the same content in different places and in different ways. So, it's the age-old water cooler conversation, right? People are showing up at work the next day and they're all talking about the show, but they're all consuming it differently. So our goal is to really help to make sure that if we have, if there's some place that people should be, making sure that they're there no matter how they're consuming that content. So if they've got linear covered, great. We can cover OTT and CTV, and we can cover, other things like mobile video, just to make sure that we're getting them all along the way in the funnel.
Do you recommend that blending strategy for mobile video to kind of compress pricing and increase volume?
Wherever we can.
Oh, good.
It is something that we believe in. Look, my philosophy all over the years has always been that multiple layers will result in a better result, because people consume differently all day, and they consume differently weekday to weekend. They consume differently on Monday than they do on Wednesday. There's a variety of reasons why things change. So, we're always looking for ways within the budget to be able to sort of move people around the customer journey and make sure we're reaching people where we can.
You said a term to me when we were talking last week. You said you called linear the bathtub. Can you elaborate on that for a minute, and then we're going to go to the Q&A really quickly. So, but just talk about that a little bit in terms of the success of your clients and how they, how you were able to describe that.
Yeah, I had a mentor very early on in my career, and we always used to talk about things being the umbrella. This is the umbrella. This is the umbrella. And when it came to talking about some of the bigger pieces that we were talking about the umbrella, we were filling in so many holes with smaller things that the umbrella actually filled in the space as opposed to cover all of it. We sort of had different pieces all over, it was more of a checkerboard effect. And then we took this big piece and we helped to fill in the gap as opposed to just being overarching over the top. And again, I think that you alluded to this earlier, depending upon, larger, smaller clients. I mean, you in Highland Park, Illinois, right? I mean, you got to do multiple things within that space. And I think that's what we learned over time, was sometimes it's not just about the umbrella, but it's filling in the gaps is what we had to use some of those bigger pieces for. That's great.
And lastly, can you share some best practices with the participants here on, things that you kind of absolute go to the mattresses type of best practices?
Best practices for me, and again, you covered it, test. I mean, it doesn't really matter what your budget is. There's always a way to test, and there's different nuances to testing. I think a lot of people talk about, A/B testing with creative. I like to use on and off as a way to test, because when you run something and then you take it away, sometimes you actually find out about its success in its absence. Sometimes that takes a long time to give that space, but you can really learn a lot, in that space, and for me, CTV and OTT and all of it, and video right now, it really is affordable. I mean, you talked about a $25 CPM and whether that's expensive or not, and there's a variety of people that are on this call and everybody has a different sense, but the reality is that that's the cost of what it is to go in to reach people. The question is, what's the result? And when you measure the result, that's really where you find out whether it was good for you or it was not good for you, and whether it was really efficient or not. It's really what you pull out, as opposed to what you pull in, at least from the way that I look at it. So to me, it's, this is something that has become affordable, it's targetable, it's measurable. These are the kind of things that we're looking for as marketers, and that's really what we go for.
I thank you so much. I don't have to say a lot of things because you say them, and I think you said to me, it was a week or two ago, you said, there's nothing, it's funny, you and I both serve our clients and we're very passionate about it and we want them to be successful. But in the end, there's nothing to be afraid of with a medium like this. It works. It's out there. So now it's just a question of, can you match your expectations and needs to whatever the model looks like that's going to get you there as quickly as possible and as cost efficiently as possible. And, when there's nothing to be afraid of, it works. And I'm excited that, GroundTruth, we've made nice, great gains in CTV and OTT. I read the trade rags every day. Everybody's moving and shaking. It's really a fun time to be in this, audio visual space. With connected TV and OTT. And, I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about this.
Absolutely.
Greg, thank you so much. There's 3 questions and I want to, they seem to kind of just generally be general questions, but I'm going to hit them here. Can the ads run programmatically? What networks will they run across? Can we run against consumer segments? So can the ads run programmatically? Yes. Secondly, and we are also, our audiences are live in the trade desk. If you already have your deal ID and you want to just go in and look at GroundTruth audiences, which of course are built on real world behavior. And can you run against consumer segments? Yes, you can. So we also have access to that data as well. Another question is, can connected TV and OTT be used for retargeting campaigns? Yes, they can and should be. Anytime you have the ability to, take a mobile campaign and retarget to OTT, do it. That's the best investment that you can make, right? I mean, that's Greg, you'd make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I just want to go back to the first one also, just as a little, and again, not as an ad so much for GroundTruth, but understanding that, being able to do this programmatically and seeing what those audiences are, you guys have your audience set as well. And that allows you to see if you're trying to reach a consumer that, that has been, you want to reach a competitor, you want to do competitive conquesting, great way to be able to do.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Somebody just posted another question is, do we think that that connected TV, we'll just say streaming video, can produce a better ROI than banners? And I'm gonna give you some thinking time on that one, Greg.
I would just say this. I think, again, it depends on, your message. We have a tendency sometimes to look at media types and want to define its success within the media type. But what you're telling the consumer and what you're asking them to do with the call to action is so key in making either one of them work. And what I would say is, I think video overall, what we're learning from our clients, people are visual. As Tom, you shared what's happening in the space. People are consuming more video. So it feels like it's moving more in that direction, but it's really key that no matter what you use, make sure that the messaging is really clear in that space and you give them the correct call to action within that.
Yeah, I think the way I was going to answer that is to say, there's no right answer to that question. It's a great question because it really ultimately it comes down to, what do you want, right? What do you want the outcome to be? And if you want critical mass and volume, traditional banner advertising still works, right? If you want something that has sight and sound and motion attached to it, that has other capabilities that can also be measured, but appears to be more expensive, then talk that out with your partner first, because you may find that, when in the end, once you start looking at the actual investment versus the return, you may do better off upstream than you might downstream. So, and that's our questions. Greg, I want to say thank you so very much for the time. I appreciate you, and I appreciate, working with you and Source. It's always great. Like I said, I really, really was looking forward to this conversation. I could do this with you for like another 2 hours, but I think you're probably like, but you're probably like, we're done, Tom. Let's wrap it up. So, but I would ask the rest of the folks on the call here, if you could please, make sure that you are, that you filled out the form, and submit your questions Q&A, and reach out to your GroundTruth representative or email us at adexpert@groundtruth.com. And thank you so very much, folks. And a special thanks to Greg Spiegel from Source Communications for joining us today. And I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Take care.
Thanks. Bye, Greg.